All right, everybody, we got a little 3-car garage here we're going to do. I'm going to kind of show this as sort of a how-to for some of the contractors and or do-it-yourself customers who need to be walked through some of the steps. As you can see, we've already gotten started on some of the grinding. This one's pretty straightforward. Got a crack there in the floor. We're using a general surface grinder. It's got 2 10-inch discs on it. We're using some medium diamonds. We're going to grind off this existing JFP, or what I like to call just freaking paint. Someone bought it at one of the hardware stores just to impart color on the concrete. We don't sell JFP, we sell good industrial coatings. And so what we're going to do is a full flake broadcast floor. We're going to grind, remove as much of this old coating as possible, which we should be able to get about 95% of it off. Anything that's going to be left is just going to be in the low areas where the grinder just doesn't quite get. And you can see this is probably sufficient right here. We've got kind of a little bit of an area right here, a little bit of an area right down here that's still got some epoxy on it. That's fine. We'll do one final clean. I'll hit some of these areas one last time. Obviously this back area back in here, we're going to get more of that off right there. And then all the edges we're going to hit with a hand grinder. So we're going to come in here, we're going to hand grind all this, get all the way up to the edges here. All that'll be gone. So I'll talk a little bit more about why we prep concrete the way we do, maybe in just a little bit. But for now, we're going to get back on the grinder and see if we can get all of this prepared and ready to go. We should be able to get the primer coat on today, and depending on the temperatures and the time, we might actually get our broadcast done as well later this evening. So, all right, everybody, so we're about 90% done with our surface prep. Took our Metabo edge grinder, got all the edges. As you can see, we've got a good 95% or more of the original epoxy removed. We're going to go back through, do another vacuum. Just want to make sure we get as much of the dust off as possible. With I'm going to patch this crack here as well. It goes down that way and runs across just a bit. Now, with our dust, grinding is always the best way to prep the concrete, especially on some of these smaller jobs. It doesn't usually make sense to do a shot blast. But the downside of grinding is you're creating an asinine amount of dust, and you want to get the majority of that off. Now, I've already vacuumed this floor really well once, and you can see there's still a lot of dust on the floor. Now, your epoxy needs to soak into the concrete. One of the reasons why you grind the concrete is to remove the surface layer or the latence layer. The top cream layer of concrete, when it's placed, is very, very dense and tight. That's what makes it such a good wear surface when it's by itself. However, if you don't remove that, then you put epoxy on and it simply sits on top and it doesn't soak into the concrete. As long as you grind the concrete, remove the latence layer, and allow the epoxy to soak into the concrete, then you're going to get a really, really, really good bond. However, if you don't, then your epoxy is going to peel off very, very easily. And in the case of a garage floor like this, the first time you pull in with some hot tires, once those tires cool, they're just going to peel that epoxy off. Now in this case, we've ground the floor. We have really, really good surface texture. You're shooting for something about like a 40 to 60 grit sandpaper texture feel. But we got a lot of dust, and so we have to vacuum and vacuum and vacuum. And sometimes if you have the luxury, you actually wash the floor. If you wash the floor, you'll get 98% of the dust off. If you're vacuuming the floor very, very, very well, you'll get 90% of the dust off. Vacuuming just does not tend to get 100% of the dust. However, in this case, we're just going to vacuum, and we'll probably come back and I'll do a final blowdown 1 or 2 times to get as much of the dust off as possible before we proceed. So anyway, we're going to get that done. We'll get a primer put on. I've also got to do a little bit of cove base, which I hope to show you guys in this video as well. Guys, what we're going to do now is our cove base. And what I've done here is, you can use cove strip, but I didn't have any, so I just used some duct tape. Marked off our line, went ahead and did a good solvent wipe to try to get the existing paint or whatever it is. I'll prop this door open here. Get it kind of softened up and clean. Also, what I went ahead and did is, to make my cove material, I use a trowel grade sand. It's a blended aggregate. It's made for overlays, epoxy patching, what have you. And then I use 3/4 of a gallon of epoxy, 100% solids epoxy. I go ahead and mix up my A and B. I go ahead and pre-prime my cove base. You want just enough. And now this is pre-pigmented tan. This was some leftover sample material that I had. And you want to just put that on as thin as you can get it, just enough to sort of make the surface tacky. You can see it's still translucent. You can see through it. That's okay. Again, you're just trying to wet out the surface to give your epoxy mortar something to bond to. Go ahead and take the remainder of your resin, which is going to be the majority of it, and you're going to mix it 3/4 of a gallon with a 50-pound bag of sand. And this is about the consistency you're looking for. This is starting to get warm, so it's kind of kicking on me. So I'm going to go ahead and get to work. But I wanted to show you guys real quick just kind of how to do this. If I can do this on my own, what I do is go ahead and throw your sand in there. And sometimes I'll use a margin trowel if I can. Go ahead and trowel that up the wall. And then if you put a little bit more down in the corner, take your cove trowel here. This is just a 4-inch cove trowel. And come in and just finish that off like so. And that's how you do your cove base. You come back and kind of clean that up. Slick your trowel off with either xylene or MEK. Works really well. We're gonna go ahead and get this finished, and I'll show you what the end product looks like. All right, so here's our cove base. One thing I like to mention, and it's not terrible. There's guys out there who are like, oh, that cove base sucks. Well, yeah, to you it probably does. But this is gonna do for what we've got going on here, because we're gonna come back and do a full flake broadcast over the top of this. So it doesn't need to be perfect. We're just forming up the wall here, making a nice little transition. I'm gonna let this set up. We'll pull the tape. Should have a decently clean line across the top. Biggest complaint that I have from people when I tell them how to do cove base is they come in and they try to do all the work with this. It's a terrible idea. In my opinion, and there's other people out there who may have other theories, but when you're doing cove base, all you really need to do is wet out the surface, pack in with a trowel, and sometimes I use a small margin trowel. This is the only one I had available today. Pack it up the wall, and then when you come back with this, all you're really using this for is to form the shape of the cove. The cove's already there. You don't need to pack it in and use this trowel to try to make it stay on the wall. Once it's on the wall, leave it. Don't overwork it. I have people just call me and curse me up one side and down the other, and your cove material sucks, and it won't do this, and it won't do that. I'm like, I usually, if I can, show up on the job and show them how to do it, or show them how I do it. And they're like, well, I couldn't get it to do that. I'm like, you know what, don't overwork it. Just come in, pack it on the wall, get the shape, and use your cove trowel to really just literally form your radius. So anyway, that's what it looks like. You know, it's not the perfect job, but again, for what we've got going on here, you know, it's gonna turn out really, really nice. So if we come back later and some of it's falling off the wall, not the end of the world, we can touch it up. I've got some epoxy patch material. We can always come in, touch it up. Again, we're gonna do a full flake over the top of it. So anyway, that's what we have for now. We're gonna do some cleaning up and get ready to put our primer down. All right, so we're back the next day. We've got our primer down. It's always a good thing when you come in the next day and your primer's gotten hard and there was no issues. We did have a rainstorm come in yesterday late evening, and so I didn't prime up underneath the doors. The concrete's still slightly wet, and I didn't want to take a chance of having an issue there. So anyway, we've already patched our cracks, got everything staged, and I'm just about ready. I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys what I did with my cove base here. So Pulled the tape, did a pretty good job on it. Pretty happy with it. Now, what some people will do on their coves, they'll just mix regular epoxy, they'll brush it up, they'll broadcast it. The problem with epoxy is you can only go about 8 mils vertical before it starts to run and sag. And so what I like to do is I'll actually do epoxy and Cabasil. I actually cheated here today. This is some of my patch material. It's already got Cabasil in it. And so it makes a nice thick, brushable, if you will, consistency. And so what I'm gonna do is, I'm not gonna record all of it, but I'm gonna come in and you can brush this, get a nice solid line there, and you can get this stuff on as heavy as you need, and it stays where you put it. And we can go ahead and bring this down. You don't have to worry about the texture or the porosity, if you will, of your cove, because this stuff is thick enough that it's going to fill it in. Another good thing about it is a patch material. And so if you've got an area that needs to be filled in or touched up, this will do the trick. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish brushing this in, and then I'm going to come back and get a nice straight line there. Get this smoothed out as well as I want to get it, and then I'll come back and literally just take my flakes, and you can either broadcast them in, or what I may do is actually press it. Wearing a glove, actually just take a handful and just sort of press it into this material, and it should stay right where I want it. And so we're going to do this on the cove, and then I'll come back and show you guys what it looks like. Alright, so I've got my cove base all brushed out with my patch material, and as you can see I've already started getting the flake up on the wall. In hindsight I probably should have taped this off again, but live and learn. So I'm just going to show you guys kind of here what I'm doing. Just sort of lightly coming in, and it just sort of sticks to whatever's wet. So not super hard on the bigger jobs where you've got a lot of this going on. If you're doing a lot of cove base and you need to flake it, you can actually throw your flake on the floor and then take a leaf blower and just blow it up, and obviously whatever it touches is wet, it's going to stick to. So works really well, a whole lot faster in my opinion. Obviously if you can have your epoxy a complementary color to your flake, then if you do have a light area, it really doesn't show through. So anyway, that's that. We'll come back here in just a bit and start putting some floor down. All right, so where we are now is we've got our stairs done. We've got quite a bit of the floor cut in. Already started doing some of our broadcasts. Just got my third mix, I believe, third or fourth mix out. So just going to kind of give you guys some pointers on broadcasting your flakes. I always, when you're tying in, you want to try not to get too far away, unless you're wearing spiked shoes. I'm being lazy today and not doing my spiked shoes, simply because when I put primer on the floor, walking in spiked shoes is unbelievably slippery. And so if I can keep from doing it, sometimes I will. When you're throwing your flakes, there's a couple different ways you can do it. You want to try to just sort of let them rain down onto the floor. Obviously, I'm doing a full broadcast of flakes. It's the only way that I like to do flakes, and the reason being is there's no discrepancy between your opinion of full broadcasts and my opinion. Full broadcast is full broadcast. So the other technique you can have is sort of a feeding the chickens, if you will, where you throw it, kind of let it hit, and it rolls on over the floor. You always want to be looking for shiny spots where perhaps the epoxy was a little bit heavier and maybe you're getting some bleed through. You know, the advantage of doing a primer coat first is that your base coat for your broadcast goes a lot farther. So you tend to get a lot better or a lot more consistency, if you will, with your flakes. So if you can see, there's a couple little shiny spots there where we've got some bleed through, maybe right here, and there's some back here in the corner. So I'll throw some more flakes on those, but that's pretty much what we got going on. It's gonna look good. All right, so we've got our flake down yesterday. I've already come in and kind of blew all the flakes black, blew all of the flakes back in the corner. We shoveled up as much as we could save, and then vacuumed everything else. Now, one thing I want to note about a full flake floor, let's see if I can get it in a picture where you can see here. You've got differences in texture. Basically what's happening here is, the shinier spots obviously had probably a little bit more epoxy and a little bit less flake. The advantage there is that the flakes are actually laying down. Everywhere else, as you can kind of see, it's got a little bit of a carpet texture to it. That's where some of the flakes are standing up. So the way we're going to address that, you can take your vacuum and actually vacuum the whole floor. The act of vacuuming it will kind of knock down some of those flakes. However, what I like to use is the Flake Scraper 2000. It's American engineering at its best. Happy to make these for sale for $150 on the website. How about that? Or you can just make your own. So literally just a scraper taped to the end of a pole. I'm going to take this and just kind of gently scrape across the floor. I'll do this to every square inch of the floor, and what it does is it's literally going to cut off those flakes or break them off that are standing up, so we'll have a completely consistent floor with regard to texture and appearance. And then we're going to come in and seal this off after we get this done. Again, full flake floor, extremely forgiving. Trash, bugs, leaves, all that stuff that gets in it when it's still wet are completely, literally either just get hidden by the floor, or you can knock them out the next day, and it's not that big a deal. One thing I did want to mention is you will have some areas, I don't know if you can see it here, where we're a little bit light on our flake. Obviously I was around the corner when I was broadcasting these, so you can kind of see this area here has got a lot more of the gray epoxy showing. Another advantage of using your receiving coat of your epoxy in a complementary color, it really doesn't stand out that bad. However, when I come in and do my seal coat, we'll broadcast some more flakes into that. I'll probably mix up a little bit. We'll touch that up, throw some flake, and then by the time I come back and re-top coat everything, it should be set up. So anyway, very easy to touch up and make it look nice. We'll show you our cove base here. Obviously, turned out really nice. So we're going to seal all that off, and we should be good to go. So we'll come back. Final video of the flake floor that we did. It's been a couple days since I finished it off. I'm just now having a chance to come back over. As you can see, we've probably got a couple bugs that have landed on it since we originally finished it off, but turned out great. Again, we did a grind to remove the JFP, just freaking paint. We did a primer coat, and then we did a pigmented base coat, full broadcast of flakes, came back and vacuumed those off. And then we scraped the floor to remove any of the flakes that were standing up. Vacuumed it again, got it clean. We did a really tight coat of clear epoxy, as tight as we could get it, 160 square foot a gallon. So about 10 to 16 mils just to seal the flakes off. And then we came back with a really tight coat of just a polyaspartic to give us some chemical and UV resistance. So overall, super durable floor. It's going to turn out great. Hides a lot of imperfections as the homeowner, drives on it, drags things, drops it, scratches it, what have you. It's not going to show any of that wear and tear over time. So we did end up doing the stairs. They turned out great. And of course our cove base turned out fantastic as well. So anyway, again, you can see the bugs that have landed on it, need to be cleaned off. some of them may be a little stuck and fossilized. But anyway, appreciate you watching the video. Feel free to give us a call if you have questions about products, application, things like that.